Hey y'all! It is June, or just about, and June is Pride Month, as many of you know. What you may not know is that I am a transgender man. And my friends have been sort of anticipating this video for a while, I think, but I really wanted to make sure that I knew what I wanted to talk about and focus on, and that I was still able to sort of place the focus more on me as an artist and less on my personal identity. So I'm going to be digitally painting a glass pickle with the trans flag colors while I talk a little bit about my story. I realized that I was transgender when I was 27 years old. Growing up in the Bible Belt in the 90s, I didn't exactly have a lot of representation or education on LGBTQ plus topics. Multiple people knew that I was trans before I realized it. I actually had two different therapists ask me directly if I was experiencing gender dysphoria, but both times I said no. I was just a tomboy, just a masculine woman, just me. And I think a big part of my problem was that being trans had always been centered around pain and suffering. You must hate your body this much to be trans. But I didn't. I never hated my body. I was a beautiful girl and I knew it. I had the type of body that movie stars went to extreme lengths to achieve. So I would look in the mirror at myself, feel my throat close up, and think, what is wrong with me? Why can't I appreciate what I have? It wasn't bad or ugly, it just wasn't me. It was as if my brain was rejecting the information. I'd close my eyes and feel my big strong shoulders and the itch of my beard, and then I'd open my eyes and see her. It felt like waking up glued inside of a costume. But because I had never felt anything else since I could remember, even as a child, it didn't occur to me that other people didn't feel the same way. I didn't know there was an alternative. And I didn't understand that so much of the depression and discomfort that I felt day to day was just the dysphoria that I had learned to repress since childhood. I tried everything I could think of for years to enjoy living as a woman. Different styles, different relationship dynamics, different careers. It never got easier. When COVID quarantine started, I was living alone in an apartment and I became trapped within my own thoughts with nowhere to go. I was so anxious and depressed that I could barely move out of bed. I lost my job. One day, there was this thought that sort of poked its way into my brain. What is gender? I made an anonymous internet post that basically just said, I don't understand how people have this concept of what gender they are. I don't feel any attachment to my own body or my gender at all. A trans person just happened to see this and said something that ended up saving my life. Are you sure that you don't have a gender? Or do you have one in mind, but you're afraid that you could never pass? That one comment brought back a flood of memories from my childhood. I remembered watching Mulan for the first time when I was 5 or 6 years old and crying so hard because I too didn't recognize the girl I saw in the mirror. I remembered hitting puberty and trying to tape down my chest, then buying a long coat and wearing it everywhere with a hat. I cut my hair short, wore loose clothing for years, anything to obscure the shape of my body in public. But people still called me her, and so I gave up. I decided that I needed to accept that I was turning into a woman. There was nothing I could do to stop it. I was in therapy for over 10 years, but nothing ever stuck. It's very unusual for a therapist to ask their patient if they might have gender dysphoria. It's kind of considered a zebra. I don't know if you've ever heard this phrase. In medicine, don't look for zebras, look for horses. But two of my therapists got so frustrated with me that they actually mentioned it by name. Because, like any other medical diagnosis, if you treat the wrong thing, you won't make any progress. I was trying to treat my depression and anxiety without acknowledging the underlying gender dysphoria. So for a decade of my life, I made no progress with my mental health. It kept getting worse and worse. I was hospitalized 5 times. The doctors were getting desperate. They just wanted to keep me alive. So when I started experimenting with a masculine haircut and wearing men's clothing, my doctors were actually thrilled. They could see a difference in me immediately. My mental health was improving, and so was my physical health. Happiness really is the best medicine. Every little step in my social transition was saving my life, so they recommended me to a gender therapist. I arrived for my first appointment with my gender therapist with a masculine haircut, wearing a chest binder and all men's clothing, and using he, him pronouns. So the gender therapist said, "Are you here for a recommendation for hormone therapy?" And I was confused, and I said, "I just want to make sure that I'm actually trans." I imagine it must have taken him every ounce of self-control not to roll his eyes. To the outside world, there's this perception that transitioning is really a last resort decision which you should avoid at all costs. So you need to be really sure that you're suffering enough to be worth it to transition, because you could destroy your body and end up a social pariah, unable to ever date or find love. And so people kept telling me this. They kept saying I should wait at least 5 years to start hormone treatment, that I needed to think about the consequences. But from a doctor's perspective, denying life-saving treatment for 5 years to avoid social backlash is an insane choice. Can you imagine if we said the same thing to people considering taking antipsychotics to treat schizophrenia or getting a pacemaker for a heart condition? Think about the consequences. This could destroy your body. Don't take the medication that your doctor prescribed you unless you've spent years worrying about the side effects. The doctors didn't want me to wait years because, statistically speaking, I was being hospitalized every other year at that point. I probably wouldn't have survived another 5. But the other thing which my doctors knew that I didn't yet understand is that trans medicine is nowhere near as risky, invasive, or irreversible as the media likes to portray. The medication and surgery which I was considering had been invented for cisgender people and was well studied, safe, and affordable. And even if I detransitioned someday and changed my mind, it was completely possible for me to live as a woman with a deep voice and a little beard growth. So again, from the doctor's perspective, the rewards far outweighed the risks. If you had a reasonable suspicion that a medication could save your patient's life right now, and the only possible downside if you found out it was a misdiagnosis, maybe they have some beard scruffle, they need to do a little voice training. So what would you do? They were more than happy to help me with whatever my transition goals were. The only question remained to them: what did I want? No two transitions are going to look identical. Each transition is made up of a long series of individual choices based on that person's goals. Not every trans person wants a binary gender role or presentation. And in my personal opinion, there are infinite reasons for people to want whatever they want. I think in some case, my transition was easier to explain to people because I knew pretty quickly that I wanted to be a binary man. But in other ways, it was harder to explain because I didn't see a clear path at first to achieving what I wanted. Some people just want to transition socially without changing their bodies. Other people say things like, I just can't relate to the way this one specific body part looks or feels. My gender therapist, who was a non-binary trans man, had more of that experience. He really hated his chest, and so he changed that long before taking testosterone. And I think he may have gone off of testosterone after a few years being satisfied with the permanent changes. So he asked if I wanted to change my chest. And at first, honestly, I couldn't picture it. Not because I liked my chest the way it was, I didn't. But the idea of getting top surgery before taking hormones and looking like, in my mind, a prepubescent girl was pretty much the polar opposite of what I had in mind. I knew that I wanted to be a man, but what I really wanted was to take a magic wand and spontaneously become a 6'2", broad-shouldered lumberjack. I looked at my own tiny frame and I thought, there's no way I could ever look the way I see myself in my head. So I had to take it slow. I had to gradually change things until I was able to recognize that it was possible for me to live happily as a man, even if I would never be 6 foot tall. I wrote down all the things that I liked and disliked about the idea of taking testosterone, and I realized that my dislike pile was pretty much all medical anxiety. Nearly everything else sounded fantastic. I loved the idea of being hairy, and I desperately wanted a deeper voice. As a lifelong first soprano, it was often so difficult for me to tolerate hearing my own voice that I avoided speaking much at all. I wanted a more boxy, muscular frame. I wanted a less soft face. So I finally decided that I was ready to take the leap and start HRT. I was nervous all throughout the process of getting the prescription. I heard my friends and family saying, "You're going to regret it, you need to wait." But the minute the pharmacist handed me that box, I was filled with a sense of joy and excitement that I had never experienced in my life. I haven't doubted that decision ever since. After just a few days, I started to feel a change. And then about a month in, it really hit me. I wasn't sad anymore. It was as if the fog had been lifted and I was able to just exist and be me. It felt like I had been trapped in a dream my entire life, and finally I was able to wake up. Like the tiny drip, drip, drip of water drops hitting my face that were slowly driving me insane were finally taken away, and I could just breathe. I sat in my room and looked up from my homework, and I just smiled. This was before pretty much any physical changes had happened. My body looked the same, but my mind was clear. It was as if my brain had been physically craving testosterone for years, crying out for help. And now it was finally able to relax. Was this how most people felt every day of their lives? Just okay? Comfortable just existing? It was hard for me to fathom. That was the beginning but there was so much more joy to follow. As my body slowly changed shape from a woman to a boy to a man, every new change was thrilling to me. The shape of my nose was different. The muscles in my arms caused them to fall differently at my sides. I was physically stronger. Even the way I walked changed. My feet fell at different angles, and I lost my pelvic tilt, which caused me to get a full 1.5 inches taller. My shoes even changed size. My voice slowly dropped from that first soprano to a full baritone, 2 full octaves lower. Despite being 28 years old, testosterone really did a number on me. I never thought that I would be able to pass as a man in public, especially starting later in life. But in less than a year, strangers started instinctively calling me sir. And I found that being read as male in public made it significantly easier for me to make friends. No longer was I the awkward girl who quietly got uninvited to girls' nights. No longer did the boys exclude me from their groups. Suddenly it was easier for me to make friends because I was allowed to assume the role that I felt most comfortable with. I finally decided to get top surgery, and it was surprisingly easy and painless. No, literally painless. They injected my chest with nerve blockers, and by the time they wore off, I just needed to take 3 regular ibuprofen a day for a month or 2. I barely felt any pain at all. The recovery was very boring, sort of mentally taxing, because I had to avoid lifting my arms up for 3 months to help it look aesthetically better. But I recovered full sensation in my entire chest. I can't say I'm thrilled with the way it looks because 2.5 years in, I still have very dark scars. But I feel so much lighter when I walk, when I roll over in bed. I noticed a huge reduction in day-to-day anxiety, and I really like the way that I feel. And that's kind of the point. We don't transition to look more attractive to other people. We do it to feel better for ourselves. Whether or not somebody finds me attractive is not a big concern of mine compared to having the will to live. Anyway, last year at the age of 32, I was finally able to graduate college. My health improved so drastically that when I went from being constantly sick to a chronic illness to taking testosterone, I was able to lift weights and go hiking. It was an absolute medical miracle. I can't even begin to describe how much transitioning has improved my quality of life. However, so I live in the US, and the last couple of years have been incredibly difficult and scary for the trans people here. My heart goes out to the Black and brown trans women of our community in particular, who have suffered the most from both social and systemic abuses. There has never been a time in US history when it was particularly easy to be a trans person, but I think it's more the backsliding which is so terrifying to our community. I was incredibly fortunate and privileged to come out when I did, at a time when it was relatively easy and legal to access the healthcare that I needed, in a city which was safer for me than most, and I'm very privileged to be able to walk in the streets looking like a cis white man. That doesn't mean that I'm immune from all the Trump administration's transphobic policies. I'm currently afraid to fly on a plane because ICE has been working on and off with the TSA to flag people whose gender marker on their ID does not match the gender marker on their original birth certificate. And thanks to one of Trump's executive orders, I am by default considered a domestic terrorist threat for practicing extremist gender ideology. Still, I made it to California. Many transgender people living in the US, myself included, are too poor to leave the country. Some of them are trapped in red states which have been implementing new laws that target them or even criminalize their existence. We don't have the numbers or the money or the power to fight this fight alone. We need your help. Here are just a few of the things that you can do if you would like to show your support to the trans community. If anyone wants to mention other groups and ways to get active in the comments, please do. Number 1, you can donate money to one of the following nonprofits: the Trevor Project, Trans Lifeline, or Trans Youth Equality Fund. Number 2, you can reach out to your local LGBTQ+ community and organizers and try to volunteer. Number 3, call your local and state representatives. Or number 4, share this video with other people to raise awareness. I will try to post all of these links down below in the description. Transgender bodily autonomy is also your bodily autonomy. If we lose the right to access the healthcare that our doctors prescribe, to self-identify, to choose the way that we can dress and present, you can lose all of those things too. That is why I invite you to please stand with us, the trans community, in this fight. It has become abundantly clear over the past year or two that a regression in trans rights is also a regression in women's rights, in gay rights, in disabled rights, in the general population's right to access the things they need to stay alive and healthy. So I implore you, please, to stand with us, but not just in the fight for our rights and for equality and respect, but also in our joy, which is just as important. Because trans joy is also human joy. The ability to express yourself is a wonderful thing. The ability to be able to affirm your gender, your identity, regardless of social backlash, is so fundamentally joyful and positive. And I think that is why the establishment is so afraid of us, because these rigid gender roles and the rigid gender binary they live in have been used to oppress people through fear for so many years. Why should a man be terrified of a tube of lipstick? Why should a woman accept that she is inherently submissive? These are not the reality of the world we live in. These are fear tactics created to control us. So ask yourself, what type of world do you want to live in? A world of fear and control and authoritarianism, or a world full of color where you are allowed to be whoever you are, whoever you want to be? Do you want to live in a world full of hate or a world full of love? We get to make that choice every day when we wake up. We get to make that choice every day. So today, I choose joy. Thank you.